Palestine, the Israeli occupation forces killed 2 children during the ongoing aggression in Jenin, northern occupied West Bank. In Saudi Arabia, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio da Silva met with the Saudi premier, further strengthening bilateral relations between both nations. And in Ecuador, the National Assembly resumes the impeachment trial against former President Guillermo Lasso, accused of embezzlement. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Two Palestinian children were recently killed by Israeli occupation army bullets during the ongoing aggression against the city of Jenin in the northern occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said in a brief statement that 2 children died as a result of wounds sustained from the occupation army's gunfire in Jenin city. The 2 children are Adam Samer Al-Ghul, 8 years old, and Basil Suleiman Abu Al-Wafa, 15 years old. The Palestinian Red Crescent had announced that its medical teams transported an 8-year-old mother from the area of Al-Basatin neighborhood in Jenin city. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas condemned the Israeli escalation in Jenin city and its camp, describing it as a Nazi aggression that will not succeed in breaking the will of steadfastness and resistance of the people in the West Bank. Meanwhile, Ghazi Hamad, a member of Hamas' political bureau, says the group has been working very hard with the mediating countries in order to reach a compromise and extend the ceasefire. Hamas expressed optimism that the truce would be extended, as a member of the political bureau said they were ready to release more hostages for the extension of the ceasefire, while they are in contact with Qatar and Egypt to see how this operation will be managed. It is hoped that this truce can be implemented today and that 2 more days of extension can be reached. Analysts say the ceasefire negotiations have entered a pragmatic phase involving various mediators and stakeholders, with Hamas reportedly signaling a willingness to extend the pause in fighting. 30 Palestinian women and children were released from Israeli jails, and 10 Israelis and 2 foreigners were freed by Hamas. In Palestine, citizens of Gaza welcomed the agreement by Hamas and Israel to extend the ceasefire for 2 additional days in the hope that it will become permanent as soon as possible.
Qatar and Egypt helped to negotiate the 4-day humanitarian truce in the Gaza Strip that started last Friday, November 24th, where Hamas released a list of 50 Israeli prisoners in exchange for 150 Palestinian hostages. The agreement came to fruition and the parties decided to extend the truce for 2 more days.
Like everyone else, we would like a definite ceasefire. We live under a lot of pressure. We are worried every night about the possible bombing the next day. But we are also grateful for the efforts of the international community to have extended truce for another 2 days.
However, despite the ceasefire agreement, the Gaza Strip still faces multiple problems such as shortages of food, fuel, medical supplies and shelter, among many others.
Food and other needs in the Gaza Strip are still far from adequate. There are no words to describe how I feel.
Citizens hope that with the collaboration of the international community, a permanent ceasefire can be reached and they can return to their lives before the armed conflicts.
We have relaxed a bit in the last couple of days. We hope that the international community will help us push for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza so that we can return to life as it was before the conflict. Otherwise, our lives will become increasingly difficult.
Israel declared war on Hamas on October 7 following an attack by the Islamic resistance movement which resulted in the death of over 1,200 Israelis and the capture of 250 others. Since then, the Israeli state has killed at least 15,000 Palestinian citizens, mostly women and children, while another 7,000 remain missing.
The world reaffirms its condemnation of the Israeli onslaught against the Gaza Strip as the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people is commemorated on Wednesday. The date comes in the midst of the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the consequences of which have left more than 15,000 dead in the Gaza Strip, 1,800,000 displaced, representing 80% of the population of Gaza, as well as 60% of the homes destroyed. The purpose of the commemoration is to make visible the non-compliance with the partition resolution adopted by the United Nations in 1947. This resolution provided for the creation of a Jewish state and an Arab state in Palestine, but countries around the world have denounced that only the state of Israel has been made visible, so they demand that the inalienable rights of the Palestinians be recognized. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution on Tuesday urging Israel to withdraw completely from the Golan Heights, Syrian territory occupied since 1967. The draft resolution, entitled the Syrian Golan, obtained the support of the majority of the member states, with 91 votes in favor, while 7 countries rejected the initiative and 62 countries abstained from voting. The text of the initiative, admitted annually for more than 50 years, urges Israel to withdraw completely from this occupied territory to the pre-June 4, 1967 borders and to comply with the relevant Security Council resolutions. The measure also qualifies as null, illegal, and without effect the decision of Tel Aviv taken in 1981 to impose its laws and jurisdiction over the Golan Heights. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. The President of Brazil, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, continues to develop his agenda in Saudi Arabia, the first stop of his tour of Middle Eastern countries. During his stay in the country, where he arrived on Tuesday, the Brazilian President held a meeting with the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. According to Lula da Silva, the meeting addressed issues of common interest, including Saudi investments in Brazil in various sectors and the potential of Brazilian exports. Lula said that it was agreed to work on strengthening bilateral relations. After his visit to Riyadh, Lula da Silva will travel to Doha, capital of Qatar, for a series of agendas of national interest, and finally to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where he will participate in COP28, the United Nations Conference on Climate Change. On Tuesday, the Brazilian Senate approved the protocol of Bolivia's accession to the Southern Common Market, Mercosur, and sent it to President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva for enactment. Brazil's authorization was the last step forward towards Bolivia's approval as a full member of the bloc. Previously, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay had already complied. Currently, the country has associate status in the bloc, as do Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Guyana, and Suriname. Under these conditions, it can establish free trade agreements with the members and participate in meetings. Once Brazil formalizes Bolivia's full incorporation into Mercosur, the plurinational state will have a period of up to 4 years to adopt the entire regulatory baggage of the bloc and consolidate reciprocal free trade with the other members. In Brazil, transport workers strike in rejection of privatization of the service of the state of Sao Paulo. Brazilian state subway workers, accompanied by teachers and other public sectors, began a 24-hour strike to denounce the transportation privatization projects announced by the regional administration. The demonstration is against the privatization policy of the Basic Sanitation Company of the state of Sao Paulo, the House Foundation and Lines of the Metropolitan Company, and the Paulista Metropolitan Transport Company. Demonstrators demand the abolition of the initiative to cut 10 million reals from the annual budget earmarked for the education of minors. In Panama, citizens celebrated with peaceful protest the legal decision that declared as unconstitutional the subsidiary contract of a Canadian mining company and the Panamanian state. Celebrations were replicated in different parts of the country, and many of the roads that had been closed for weeks have now been cleared. Lawyers also affirmed that the contract not only violated ecological standards, but also fundamental public administration norms that establish due legal process. In this sense, the ruling is expected to end the national crisis and make international arbitration possible for the concessionaire Panama Mining Company, a subsidiary of the Canadian mining company. For his part, President Laurentino Cortizo affirmed that after receiving the formal communication of the ruling, it will be published in the official gazette and the closure of the mine will begin. Peru's National Justice Board initiated on Tuesday a process against National Prosecutor Patricia Benavides, who, according to an investigation by anti-corruption prosecutors, heads a criminal organization. The official will be subjected to disciplinary proceedings by the highest body of the Peruvian judiciary, the National Justice Board, for alleged influence peddling stemming from the investigation of the Special Prosecutor's team against corruption in the government and the police. The revelations have led to several calls for Benavides to resign or at least take a leave of absence while the serious allegations against her are investigated, which she has steadfastly refused to do. In Ecuador, the National Assembly will resume this Wednesday the impeachment trial against former President Guillermo Lasso, accused of embezzlement. The impeachment trial against Lasso was suspended last May after the former president decreed a cross-death, a mechanism with which he dissolved the legislative and called for early elections. At that time, the debate and the vote that would take place 5 days later was still pending. This Wednesday, the judicial process will resume from that point in a reinstatement of that session. Last May, the unicameral Parliament of Ecuador initiated the impeachment trial against the banker for the crime of embezzlement for having knowledge of alleged irregularities in a contract between the state-owned Flota Petrolera Ecuatoriana and the company Amazonas Tanker, and not having acted to prevent further damage to the state. On Tuesday, the United States, dozens of students demonstrated at South Florida High School a day after its principal and 4 other staff members were removed from their position while authorities investigate allegations that a transgender student was allowed to play on a girls' volleyball team in violation of state law. The mobilization demanded equality and fairness for members of the LGBTQ+ community, as well as the right to diversity and participation in athletic activities. In 2021, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a state law banning transgender athletes from participating in public school athletic programs. On the other hand, Scott Calvin, Executive Director of Safe Schools South Florida, criticized the move against the 4 school employees, stating that facilitating a young person's participation in school activities, especially sports, is a commendable act that fosters inclusion and acceptance. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. Russia claims Western countries are trying to prevent its officials from attending a meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe to be held this week. Under European sanctions, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has had to request permission to fly over EU airspace to attend the 2-day meeting, which begins on Thursday in the North Macedonian capital Skopje. Ukraine, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania said their foreign ministers would boycott the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe meeting in Northern Macedonia this week over Lavrov's attendance, arguing that Russia should be excluded over its offensive in Ukraine. The announcement came a day after Bulgaria said it would open its airspace to the Russian minister, making a diplomatic exception to European skies close to Russia over the conflict in Ukraine.
We again see attempts by part of the collective West to do everything possible to hinder our country's normal participation in this meeting. They threaten the very existence of the organization.
On Wednesday, the Taiwan Affairs Office of China's State Council warned Taiwan's ruling party presidential candidate Lai Ching-te to withdraw pro-independence rallies.
Taiwan independence means war. The authorities of the Progressive Democratic Party stubbornly insist on Taiwan's independence and separatism stance. They collude with outside forces and seek independence and provocation, which seriously threatens peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, undermining the interests and welfare of our fellow Taiwanese.
Likewise, the spokesman described the Taiwan independence advocates as troublemakers and war provocators who would harm the integrity of Taiwan and the safety of its people.
Taiwan is currently facing the critical choice between the path of peace and war. We hope that Taiwan compatriots can have a clear idea that independence workers are troublemakers and war provokers, and that both elements make independence a harmful combination for Taiwan.
New Zealand's new Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, plans to ban the use of mobile phones in schools and repeal tobacco controls in an ambitious agenda for his first 100 days in office, released Wednesday. The Prime Minister outlined 49 measures to be taken over the next 3 months. At a press conference on Wednesday, Luxon said he wanted to rebuild the economy to tackle the cost of living, restore law and order, and provide better public services. He added that his first new law to be passed would narrow the central bank's mandate to focus solely on keeping inflation in check and boosting employment. Many of his actions reverse initiatives of the former Liberal government, such as doubling renewable energy production, disbanding the Maori Health Authority, and others that resort to polemics.
To bring about the relief to New Zealanders who have been doing it tough for way too long. It is ambitious, but it is necessary in order to bring about the relief to New Zealanders who have been doing it tough for way too long. The priorities of our government are no secret. We have been very clear to the people of New Zealand that we will rebuild the economy to tackle the cost of living, we will restore law and order, and we will deliver better public services.
Senegal's military has seized more than 3 tons of cocaine from a ship moored off the coast in one of the country's largest drug holes. The Navy said Tuesday a Navy patrol boat seized nearly 3 tons of pure cocaine aboard a ship intercepted 93 miles off the coast of Dakar. The Navy posted to X, formerly Twitter. Naval authorities said there were 10 crew on board, one of whom was Senegalese. The vessel was then escorted to a naval base in Dakar, where it arrived on Tuesday for identification and logging of the seized products. The UN body says between 2019 and 2022, at least 57 tons of cocaine were seized in West Africa or en route to the region, primarily in Cape Verde, Senegal, and Benin. Long considered a simple transit zone for drugs, this area has become a region of high consumption, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. In Kenya, the death toll rose to 120 due to floods led by heavy rainfall since October. Authorities report that some 36,000 people have been displaced due to those rainfalls having hit the country. They set up temporary camps to assist the affected citizens. In this context, officials continue their search and rescue actions. In the meantime, they urge the population to keep up the corresponding security measures. On Wednesday, Greenpeace revealed that a sharp rise in sales of gas-guzzling export utility vehicles by the world's 3 largest automakers has wiped out any climate gains from the company's transition to electric vehicles. The fleets of SUVs produced by Toyota, Volkswagen, and Hyundai Kia have seen sales increase by more than 150% over the past decade. The companies are therefore moving in the opposite direction of global efforts to curb CO2 emissions, Greenpeace reported. The analysis dovetails with separate research published earlier this month by the Global Fuel Economy Initiative Expert Alliance, which found the trend toward larger SUVs is preventing emissions reductions in the auto sector. Greenpeace said SUVs emit 12% more carbon dioxide than sedans. We have come to the end of this news brief, but before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscasts and contribute to provide an alternative news source of the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.